people who otherwise don't participate. We also go door to door, next year go door to door with 7 national labor unions in swing states. We hit 15 million doors in 2016. We hit 10 million doors last year. Both of those operations are still ongoing. I'm not running them, but they basically stand for what I believe in, which is turnout. When you think about what we're trying to do, there are 2 different ways to think about winning. One is to persuade people who can't decide if they like Donald Trump. And if you do that, then you basically have to sound a lot like a Republican, and you kind of try and figure out what they want to hear. To me, that's about 2% of America. Somewhere between 30 and 50% of America, 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 2 people in America don't vote. And I personally talked to hundreds of them, and they always say the same thing. No one tells the truth. Nobody responds to my needs. The system doesn't work. Why would I participate in that system? And that's the start of a conversation for us, particularly with young people, particularly in Black and brown communities across the United States of America. Why does it matter if I vote? And the truth is, if we all turn out, that is the first step to breaking the corporate stranglehold on our government and to actually meeting the needs of the people who we're talking to. So in order to, when you think about a strategy under those circumstances, a turnout strategy, you want to tell the truth all the time. You want to actually meet the needs of the American people. You don't compromise on what you say, you try to tell exactly the truth. So that's what I want to do. And let me say this, I know that when people write about me or describe me, they often start with the description of me as being rich. That, they think, here's this rich guy. So let me say this, my mom was from Minneapolis. My uncle was a professor at the University of Iowa for 40 or 50 years. He taught constitutional law. My aunt is going to turn 100 years old in Iowa City on December 15th, 2.5 weeks from now. I will have to be there. I say to everybody, some people think the big date in Iowa is February 3rd, the Iowa caucuses, but I can tell you my Aunt Betsy thinks the big day is December 15th. My mom taught in public schools. She taught in New York public schools. She taught remedial reading in the Brooklyn House of Detention. My father was the first generation in his family to go to college. He became a lawyer. He stopped his law career to become a naval officer in World War II, which everyone in his generation, my parents are Depression-era World War II babies. Everybody knew they had to be in the war. He knew he had to be in the war. He ended up, because he already was a lawyer, prosecuting the Nazis after the war. So he, at the Nuremberg trials, he was one of the people who was interviewing and prosecuting Nazis. And he said, when I asked him about it, if you see something really wrong in your society, then you should fight it really early. I can tell you from having been in Germany after the war, they didn't really fight it, and it took over. And that is why I started Need to Impeach. There is something really wrong at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. It's not political convenience. It's not political calculation or tactics. If there's something really wrong, then you have to fight it very early, and you have to keep fighting it so it doesn't take root in society. That was, and 8 million Americans, my goal in Need to Impeach was lift the voices of Americans. Let the morality of Americans rule the day, not the political convenience in Washington, D.C. And that's actually what I believe in my heart happened, is that people had to listen. And if you think about whatever you respect most in American history, whatever we have done or whatever Americans have done, it's never been about political convenience. It has never been about political calculation. It's always been about standing up for what you believe in, regardless. And that is exactly where we are. From my standpoint, there are 2 huge challenges here. One is to break this corporate stranglehold. Look, I want term limits. We were discussing term limits. I want 12-year term limits for congresspeople and senators. Because if you want bold change, we're going to need new and different people. And we're in Iowa. So I know Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham are not from Iowa, but I also know Chuck Grassley is from Iowa. And he's a perfect example of we need new and different people in charge. I also believe that what I'm talking about for states would change the United States of America. If Americans could pass our own laws, it would change everything. And I'll give you an example. Everybody wants mandatory background checks on gun purchases. Republicans overwhelmingly want. They're not crazy. They want mandatory background checks on gun purchases. NRA members want mandatory background checks on gun purchases. We don't have them. We have had over 330 mass shootings this year. And the reason we don't have this is the NRA is controlled by gun manufacturers. And they don't want mandatory background checks because they like to sell guns. And so they're making a calculation that they'd rather sell guns than protect school kids. And it really is that simple. And the drug companies really like to sell expensive drugs. And so we pay 10 times as much for insulin as Canadians pay for insulin, and there's a law that says you can't drive to Canada to buy your insulin. Really? Who would write that law except a drug company? We literally pay 100 times for a drug what they pay in Australia. Literally 100 times. We pay $700 a pill, they pay $7. It's amazing. So we have to do that. And I would do term limits, I'd do a national referendum. I would make it as easy to vote as possible, because part of this is preventing Americans from voting, specifically suppressing the vote of African Americans, making it hard to find polling places, making it hard for people to vote, so it's not fair. And the idea that a corporation is a person. I mean, the Supreme Court has said, and Mitt Romney believes, that a corporation is a person, but common sense dictates that actually corporations aren't people, and they don't deserve the political rights of an American citizen, and their control hangs on that political right. So I would do structural change, and I would declare a state of emergency on climate on day one. I mean, I've said I'd make it my #1 priority. I would. We actually have to do this. But I would also use it. We have to do it, but we can do it in a way that we literally rebuild and reimagine America in a fantastic way. We can use it to create millions of good-paying union jobs across this country. We can use it to clean up the air and water across this country, particularly in the low-income communities and black and brown communities where this country has concentrated its air and water pollution. We have always led, I've worked on this for over a decade, and we've always led with environmental justice, making sure that people get to breathe clean air, drink safe water, and it's just not true in lots of America. In lots of America, those things aren't available, and that to me is right. But the other thing we need to do is, we actually need to lead the world on this. This is not a problem we can solve inside the boundaries of the United States. And I'll give you the numbers that I use that explain that. We have 237 coal plants left in the United States. We've closed 290. They don't make any sense. They're too expensive, they make people sick and die early, they're terrible for climate. It just doesn't make sense. So they're going to close because they don't make sense. There are 1,500 coal plants in the world. There are plans to build 1,200 more. If we close 237 coal plants and the rest of the world builds 1,200 coal plants, we're done. We lose. So we have to get our allies and partners and countries around the world to go along with us, which is fine. America can lead the world. America traditionally has led the world. But we actually have to do that if we're going to win on climate. So we have to rebuild the country, Okay, you always have to rebuild the country. Everything wears out. We have to rebuild the country on an accelerated basis. We can use it to create literally millions of good paid jobs across the country. We can use it to clean up our air and water. We can use it to reinvent what it means to be an American. Look, this president has been terrible in terms of talking about the meaning, the values, the purpose of America. We're an idea about freedom and liberty and justice and equality. That's the point of this country. And he strikes at every part of that, Mr. Trump. And I don't think Americans, I look at America, we have a huge mental health issue in this country. And a lot of it has to do with people not understanding what we're trying to create together, who we are, that we're a value-driven society. People do not get up in the morning thinking, I need to make the GDP of America bigger. That is not why people were put on this earth. And everybody knows it. But we have a challenge which, if we accept, will be the biggest challenge ever, which we can definitely do, and which would change what this country stands for in the best possible way. So I look at this and I say, we have two big challenges, okay? If we do those two things, break this corporate stranglehold on our government and stabilize the climate crisis, A, we can reinvent ourselves. We will get all of the things we want. All the things that everybody on this stage is talking about in terms of progressive policies. Affordable health care is a right for every American. We will get that. We can definitely afford that. We need to work for it and drive down these prices. We can do that. Quality public education starting with pre-K and going all the way. We can definitely afford that. A living wage. The 40-year war on working people in this country, starting with the breaking of the air traffic controllers union by Ronald Reagan, is unbelievable. If you wonder whether there's been a corporate takeover of the government, take a look at where all the additional income in this country has gone for 40 years. To the very richest Americans and the biggest corporations. All of them. It's amazing. And I can tell you, I've traveled throughout Iowa and talked to working people here. They are getting a very, 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 very raw deal. And it's not that complicated. Cutting taxes leads to cutting education and cutting healthcare and an attack on working people. And that attack on working people, specifically on unions but across the board, has been incredibly successful. Americans will get a living wage. We will get clean air and clean water as a right. These are not beyond us. I mean, it sounds like we're reaching for this, but this should be a foundational right the way the Constitution gave us rights over 200 years ago. Period. We can definitely afford it. So my point is, we have two big challenges, and if we meet them, we will be in the best position of any people in the history of the world. We see exactly where we should be. So I look at this as, yeah, this is a fight. I'm a grassroots person. I want to win the fight. I don't want to compromise. I mean, I say, look, are we going to believe half of science? Are we going to allow people to have a half-good education? I've watched this Republican program, and it's wrong. It's cruel, and it's really ineffective and short run. And so I look at this as, yeah, we have to win across the board in 2020 because of turnout. We're going to win across the board in 2020, and I think if you don't believe me, take a look at 2018 and then go Virginia, Kentucky, Louisiana. It's amazing. We won the governorship of Kentucky this year and Louisiana, and Trump won those by 20 and 30%. If I were a Republican, I would be terrified. And they should be terrified, and we really need to organize and get the biggest victory ever next year, which we are going to do, because there are tens of millions more of us. And the question is, do we show up or not? And I believe under these circumstances, we don't have a choice but to show up. And so I'm sitting here saying, look, I really want your support because I really don't like what they're doing, and I know we have to fix the climate, but we really have to win this fight. Because if we win this fight, we are going to get everything. And if we don't win this fight, we are going to be in desperate trouble, which is where we are right now. Okay, thank you.